Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and this message it comes from a translation of a message that I received, and the message reads like this: Hello, my brother. How are you? I am a 40-year-old woman, and I have so much bitterness that is there in my heart, and I do not even know how to make my heart to be okay again. Sometimes I feel that my heart has turned and it has become like a stone. I do not feel like I am a human being anymore. Let me go back a little bit into the past. We grew up as poor people. In our family, there was no hope at all. We could not even afford to have our parents pay for our school fees in time because of the poverty. After my father had lost his job, my father he was working as a gardener for this other family. Then there was a time back home when a lot of white people were leaving Zim because of the economic conditions. Then my grandmother said to my father and my mother, if things are not working out for you there in the city, why don't you send or you can come with my grandchildren and I will stay with them whilst you are staying in the city. And once your things are all settled down, you can come and take them back to the city. This seemed to be a very good move, but I regret if my parents had known that this was what was going to happen to me, maybe they would have refused because my grandmother, she had other evil intentions. My grandmother knew that her days here on earth were numbered and she was suffering. My grandmother, she was suffering from this severe illness, yet she could not die. Actually, my grandmother, what she would do is that she would die, then she would wake up again. This is what she this is what kept on happening to her. The reason as to why she kept on dying and waking up again, it was because she had not yet found someone whom she could teach these things of witchcraft before she dies. So this was like a punishment to her. Most of her friends had died. She was now friends with a lot of younger women, those women that had been taught witchcraft by their grandparents or by their mothers or by their fathers. So she was like the oldest person in that club of witches in her village. When my parents took us back to our grandmother from the very first night, when the evening had arrived, we could not even sleep because we kept on hearing the strange sounds that were being made by different animals. When the morning came, my brother, I noticed that on my neck, at the back of my neck, there were some tribal markings that were done there. But to my surprise, I was not bleeding at all. When I went to show my mother, my grandmother, she was just standing right there as if she was waiting for me to come and show my mother what I had seen, everything that had happened to me whilst I was fast asleep. She quickly looked at me and she took me into her bedroom. When we went into her bedroom, my brother, I saw something that was sitting on the bed. At that time, I didn't even realize that this thing that I had seen whilst it was sitting on my grandmother's bed, it was the spirit of a goblin. It then disappeared, but now I am used to seeing these spirits of goblins or tokologies because I have been around them for many, many years. Whilst we were in her bedroom, she then looked underneath her bed and she took this small pot, and inside that small pot there was some powder, and I don't know what type of herbs they were. Then she started rubbing the powder at the back of my neck, and she just said something that was really funny, but now it all makes sense to me. At that time, it didn't even make any sense. What she said was that when I call you in the evening, please wake up my grandchild. If you hear me, calling you outside, I want you to wake up and come and join me. So I didn't understand. And after she had told me, she said, let us go back to your mom. Otherwise, she is going to get worried. We then returned back to the place where our mom was sitting. She was someone who really loved reading her Bible, mostly early in the morning. When we went there, then my grandmother, to my surprise, she started even praying with my mother. Yet she had confessed to me that she was a witch. My brother, when the evening came, I then spoke with my grandmother and I said, I do not want to get out of the house because I am someone who is afraid of the dark. She said, oh, you are afraid of the dark. Let me give you something. I will come and give you something that will not make you to be afraid of the dark. Don't you know that to us, when it is night time is our friend. We are the friends of darkness. So I didn't understand what she was trying to tell me. But when the evening came, my brother, she came and she knocked into the room where we were sleeping with some of her grandchildren. Then she gave me some meat. It was dried meat. But this meat, my brother, it was really beautiful to taste. It was really nice. After I had eaten the meat, I immediately fell asleep. And when I fell asleep, I heard that my grandmother, she was calling me and she was standing outside of that room that I was sleeping in. I woke up and I went and I opened the door and I saw that my grandmother, she was not only standing alone, but she was standing in the compound with an army of witches and some creatures that were really scary to look at. My grandmother then introduced me to the whole tribe, and she said that I was her daughter who was going to take her place, and she had done the good job and she was ready to be laid to rest. And that was what we did on that night. We all walked, and whilst we were walking, our grandmother, she was walking in front of everyone, and it was as if she was leading us to her final resting place. We went to the place where she buried all of her children, including my grandfather. Then, once we were at that graveyard, she then pointed at a spot and she said, this is the place where I want to rest. But there were two graves, my brother. There was a grave which my mother and other people that could not see what happens in the spiritual realm would see. So when they will be looking at that grave, they would think that indeed our grandmother, she is lying inside that grave. But then there was a second grave, the one that she was pointing at. This was a grave whereby only people that are spiritually gifted will be able to see. And in that grave, that is where our grandmother was going to be laid to rest. Then my brother, we started doing the ritual, but I was just standing there because I didn't even understand what was going on. I was then made to enter into my grandmother's grave after we had pretended as if we had buried her. I then went inside her grave and I laid myself on top of her body. And I swear to you, my brother, whilst I was sleeping on top of her body, it felt as if she was no longer alive. Her body was so cold, cold like ice. And I started to feel that there was this energy that was moving out of her body, getting into my heart. From that time onwards, that was when I started to notice that there was no longer any compassion in my voice. Oh, how I miss. Maybe that is what they call the voice of the Holy Spirit. But I miss that voice because it no longer speaks with me anymore. I think that as a normal human being, maybe when you want to do something that is really bad, you can feel or you can hear a voice telling you that the thing that you are about to do, it is not a good thing. But to me, my brother, there is no voice that speaks to me anymore. The only voice that sometimes I hear, it is a voice that encourages me to create jealousy in people's marriages, to create poverty in those kids that I would have seen. And after I have heard that the kid is really bright at school, then I'll start to feel this energy telling me that I need to cast a spell so that poverty can follow that kid that I would have heard that he or she is really bright in school. This thing, it started happening from that day that we buried our grandmother. And after we had buried our grandmother, those witches, they made me to lie on top of my grandmother's body. From there on, I started to lose that feeling of feeling compassionate for other human beings. Right now, I can feel that I am someone who is selfish, and I feel sometimes that I am really proud about it. The way that I am selfish, it makes me to be very proud. After that, my brother, we then all returned back to our homes, and this was like a regular thing whereby each and every night there were some people that would come and call me. And at that time, since I was still young, I was the one who I was the one whom they would make to open up the graves, because the elderly people, they can no longer open up the new graves, so they used some children. So I was part of the young kids that they used to travel with. They would give me this other reed stick, and they would say that I had to hit the grave once. Sometimes I had to hit it 3 times. Then the grave will be opened up. Then the body of the deceased would magically lie on top of the grave. Then we will start cutting it up into several pieces. Each and every one will start dining on the flesh of the deceased. Then we would return back to our homes. After I was all grown up, my brother, I then went back to the city where I started working. When I came into the city, I was working for this other woman. She was experiencing some problems in her marriage, and I made it to be very worse, because even from the very first day when I entered into their homestead, I even saw her ancestors, but they tried to fight with me, but they could not fight with me, because at that time I was still new in this game, and I was really powerful, and I had brought along soil that I had taken from my grandmother's grave when everyone was fast asleep. It is a cruel thing that I did, because when I saw that everyone was fast asleep, my boss, her husband, and their children were all fast asleep, I woke up, my brother. I was not even wearing anything underneath the bathing towel that I had wrapped around my body. I woke up and I took the soil that I had taken from my grandmother's grave, and I started sprinkling it around the house. I sprinkled it at the corners of the house, whereby I knew that no one will ever sweep at the corners of the house where I had sprinkled the soil. I worked for those people for many, many years, whilst they had the soil that I had taken from my grandmother's grave in their house. They had trusted me with anything. So whenever she wanted me to do a spring cleaning, I would not even sweep the places where I knew that I had placed the soil that I had taken from my grandmother's grave, and this caused a lot of trouble in their marriage. And whenever they would be fighting each other, sometimes they would even threaten to kill each other, and this made me to be very proud. I would even get out of the house, then I would start laughing. Why I would be laughing whilst another woman like me was being beaten up, I didn't even understand. The husband, he was not a bad man, but after I had started working for them, there was a spirit that entered into his body, the spirit that I had taken from this other cemetery that is there in Harare. I just went there, my brother, one day, and I asked any spirit that didn't have any way to go to follow me, and a lot of spirits followed me. But some of the spirits that I had asked to follow me from the graveyard, some of them they returned back. There was only one spirit. It was a spirit of a woman that followed me until I had arrived at the place where I was working, and I told the spirit what it was supposed to do. It waited by the gate for that man to return back from work. When he came back from work, that was when the spirit entered into his body. So this man, the reason why he kept on fighting with his wife, he was now possessed with the spirit of a dead woman. And whenever they will be fighting, like when two women start to quarrel, there is no one who can come in between them, because sometimes what they will be quarreling about, it won't even make any sense. That was what was happening now between that man and his wife. It was like there were two women that were now staying with each other, and we all know that two women, they cannot stay with each other because they are bound to quarrel. That was what was happening to this couple, and it made me to be very happy until I met a man. And after I had met that man, I made some charms so that he can fall in love with me and to do whatever I wanted him to do. He ended up being my husband. But unfortunately, my brother, then the turn for me to sacrifice, in Shona we call it Jana, it came to me, and the first person that I had to sacrifice and to offer his flesh was my husband. Without even thinking about it, my brother, I sacrificed him, and I do not have any regrets. Even when I look at my kids, them growing without a father, it does not even make me to feel guilty. I feel so happy that I honored my oath to my tribe that my grandmother introduced me to.